Thank you for joining us again as we move through the places of the Passion on this, the week that leads up to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Today we come to the place of Jesus' trials. After the arrest of Jesus, he was quickly swept away to face the Jewish religious leaders of the day. Somewhere from 1:30 a.m. to 6 a.m., he would face a battery of false trials and be questioned. The first place that he would be questioned is at the house of Annas. Annas was the father-in-law of the high priest Caiaphas. And Annas was a very powerful religious leader of that particular day. In John chapter 18, it says the detachment of the troops and the captain of the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. They led him to Annas first, for he was a father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest of that year. While he was before Annas, Annas' whole job was to try to incriminate Jesus. He would question him over and over again, trying to trick him into saying something that would cause them to be able to put him to death or to do away with him. Unable to do that, Scripture tells us that Annas had the guards around Jesus to begin to beat him and to mock him, to abuse him. It says, now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him. Having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, prophesy, who is this? Who is the one who struck you? And many other things they blasphemously spoke against him. So unable to incriminate him, and after beating him for a period of time and abusing him, he sent him to Caiaphas, his son-in-law, who was the high priest. At that time, Caiaphas had already brought together, assembled the Sanhedrin, who was the Supreme Court of Israel at that time. Caiaphas would then proceed to help oversee a wicked, illegal, and false trial against Jesus. They searched for false witnesses, and many seemed to have come forward, but no one was able to give something that would begin to stick to him, until finally two accusers come forward. And it says in Matthew 26, now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last, two false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Of course, Jesus is speaking about his very body, that it would be destroyed, he would sacrifice it, and they would raise it again in 3 days. But the religious leaders thought of the physical temple that they came to worship Jehovah in. And so they were saying that Jesus was being blasphemous against Jehovah himself and against the laws of God. And so the scripture tells us that the high priest Caiaphas, he tears his clothes and he says, we have no more need of witnesses. We have enough. And he looks at the Sanhedrin and says to them, what do you say we should do with this Jesus? And they all condemn him to death. Let us put him to death. In Matthew chapter 26, it says, and they spat on his face and they beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy to us, Christ, who is the one who struck you? So a second time now, between 1:30 and 6 a.m., Jesus now is beaten again. He's mocked, he's blindfolded, he's spat upon, he's faced incredible ridicule, incredible abuse. For 4.5 hours, Jesus would be abused by those he came to reveal God to. He would be lied about by those who he came to save. He would be beaten and mocked by those he chose to love. And so what does that have to do with our thoughts here this morning as we move toward Resurrection Sunday? Well, in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 21 through 23, Peter writes this, for to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who when he was reviled did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. In the midst of all of this abuse, of all these lies, by the ones that Jesus came to save, he stayed calm and he stayed loving in this place of passion. I invite you to meditate on that throughout the day today, and as we get towards Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, to consider how Jesus never said anything threatening back. He remained loving and steadfast to go to Calvary to give his life for you and I. The trials was a place of passion, his passion, in which he was resolute to give his life so that you and I might be saved. May we follow that example in the midst of difficulties, trials, sufferings that may come upon us, that we would remain calm and loving, seeking God's grace to be extended through us and forgiving others so that they may see Christ in us. God bless and have a great day.